All right, welcome. I was talking to the live group and I thought, this would be a good thing to put on the recording. We say this every once in a while, but sometimes it is always good to have the reminder because we had a couple people in the chat put that they're at work and that it's, more appropriate for them to keep their audio and their video off. And just a reminder that that is always okay. You can join from wherever you're at. And if you need to keep your audio and your video off, you're totally welcome to still join. Just allow the energy to wash over you. It's why we also give some time before we go into the breakout rooms with each other, because a lot of people aren't able to do that if they're at work. So they actually sign off in that moment. And then if you're not able to do the journey in this moment because you are at work or we're driving or something like that, the journey that we do, you can always revisit it later where it's published onto YouTube and on our podcast the Thursdays after the live event. So, anyways, I just wanted to go ahead and repeat that from just the people that join us live. We try to keep this space as stress-free and as easy and adaptable as possible so that it can just meet you where you're at, which Colleen and I and Danny, who's here as well, all really believe in, and it's a part of our practice to just allow Reiki to meet us where we are at. So always feel comfortable. There's a day you're like, I'd like to join live. I need it today, or I would like to be in that space. You're welcome to, however you need to do that.
You can also always arrive late and leave early.
Yes.
I think you may have said it, but just in case.
I don't know if I said it that succinctly. So it's good. All right. Well, welcome. Colleen and I are back from our trip. And thank you to Danny and Teresa for being here with everybody last week. We sure appreciate it and have just, it was very lovely. The talk and the journey that you did and all of that. So we're very grateful for that. And we're also grateful to be home, but we also did have a very fantastic trip, a lot of childlike wonder that we were hoping for, visiting Disneyland and California Adventure. So it was pretty fun, and we have some cute stories from the trip, of course. A few announcements. We'll keep these quick. You can go to Reiki Lifestyle to our classes page to find more information about our classes, but to those of you that are joining us live and listening on this Thursday, we do have a master class, an animal Reiki master class coming up this upcoming weekend that we do have a few spots left if you would like to join us. For those of you that have taken the animal Reiki classes with us or any classes with us, just remember too that we do have that review option if you would like as well. So that's for anybody that's taken a class. You have to have had taken a class from us in order for the review, but it is at a discounted rate. So you're welcome to also rejoin if you're feeling called. We're teaching human Reiki classes in April. Colleen's teaching in person animal Reiki 1 and 2 at the Omega Institute, Rhinebeck, New York in May. And then we're also teaching animal Reiki in person in July. I am currently working on getting the registration up for that. It's going to be on Mount Hood, Oregon. It's a beautiful location. We're doing it at Wildwood Park for those that are local. It's a wooded area on the Salmon River. So that'll be really fun. And we'll talk more about that once the registration is up. Just a heads up that that is happening. So, all right. I think that is enough announcements. We try to not keep them too long. That was a little longer than normal. So what we have been talking about in March is all about spiritual awakening and the things that come with that and the journey that that is. So we've not only been talking about it in the Distance Reiki Share. Colleen and I did a podcast together That one, has that one been released yet, or is that one coming up, Danny? Do you know off the top of your head? It's already out.
I think it's coming up.
Okay, that one's coming up. Um, we've been talking about it with our different guests and kind of their journey around spiritual awakening and what that means to them. Because a lot of people, when it comes to Reiki energy, they either find Reiki energy through their process of spiritual awakening in different modalities, or that spiritual awakening a is caused by taking a Reiki class or maybe even a multiple Reiki sessions. For some people, it is a kind of very before and after this really big experience is that is like, you take a Reiki class or have a peak experience, maybe even in plant medicine, and you are a different person after. For other people, it is a slower and maybe even a slow burn. Either way, it is always a part of the journey. So whether you have that kind of before and after experience or whether it is a slower path, it is a part of being in these modalities. Um, it is a journey, not a destination. I think that it is always happening within our path, and understanding what it means to you in an authentic way. Because there is a lot of talk about this subject, right? But really, what it comes down to is it is about how it means and what it means to you authentically, outside of the definitions of us, outside of the definitions of it from other people as well. So, one of the things that is a really interesting part of it is that it's not always easy, right? On our spiritual paths, through this process of it changing us through spiritual modalities, spiritual experiences, we can have really uncomfortable parts of it for ourselves. And so that is actually what we are going to be talking about today, are some of the pitfalls, because it's a real part of it. And we definitely don't want to gloss over some of the hardships. On the other side of it, it is a more connected version of ourselves. It's a more authentic version of ourselves. We might even have more meaning in our lives. Um, because of this process of spiritual awakening. However, that in between part can be really challenging. And I would say that, when we have, if it's kind of one of those more slow burn processes, it might be slightly easier to manage, right? That we are in this process of learning and expanding and growing. Um, More and more. And our life can adapt to that slowly and maybe even at our own pace and our own time. And I would say that, whether you have kind of one of those peak experiences where there's this before and after version of ourselves, or whether it is that slower path, we still have hills and valleys. We still have that spiral where we can tend to revisit issues in our life, traumas within our lives. So, um, even if we don't experience some of the things that I'm about to talk about, then we still have the times where it can be uncomfortable to be in this path of that continual growth and expansion, self awareness, connection, and also into moving into an authentic version of ourselves outside of that culturally created version of ourselves. So, some of the challenges that we can really experience, I would say, and not only have Colleen and myself and Danny experienced some of these things in different ways and different versions of it within ourselves, but also just being in these circles and teaching and practitioners, we witness this from a lot of people and have a lot of stories around this experience for people. I would say that one of the biggest places is a change of identity, maybe even a crisis of identity, and that there can be disorientation when we might have had long held beliefs, maybe even different frameworks that we might have had, and that those are changed. So we might have that, maybe even a little bit of an existential crisis um, in our culturally created selves. Like, who am I if I am not the person defined by these beliefs, by these, older beliefs? I think that that can look so many different ways. I know that I have certainly experienced that when I, have gone through a lot of releasing of a culturally created self. I talked about that in the upcoming podcast that we recorded, of who I thought I was coming out of college, and this corporate person of who I thought I was, and how much that changed for me because that was a culturally created self. And that bumpy road that it takes when you realize, like, oh, this is not who I am. And so many of us have so many different experiences with that, and different versions of what that looks like. Um, Also, I would say, within that are relationships. That is one of the biggest places that we might find disharmony within a spiritual awakening, becoming a different person even than who we thought we were. You can see relationships dissolve, whether that's romantic relationships, whether that is, uh, friendships, whether that's even work colleagues, whether that's family, siblings. All of those can be part of this, a part of this path of, diving deeper into the spiritual aspects. Now, it's not always, but it certainly can be. And so you do see that quite a bit when you have this exploration of um, who you are and who you are authentically. And another piece of that can be like religious um, viewpoints and community conflicts, religious community conflicts, as they might view your evolving beliefs as threatening or heretical. It's like trying to remember how to pronounce that word. And I apologize if I pronounced it incorrectly, but we have even experienced and also have heard a lot of stories of people being called heretics. So that is another place. On top of it, and it might not even be that extreme. You can just come into this place of this conflict of maybe what the outside authority of a certain belief system it defines it as, versus an internal belief system and how it defines it. And so your relationships with maybe the deities of a certain religion might also evolve in a really beautiful way. However, the community aspect, or um, the church aspect of it, can change significantly. And so that can be another place where we can have a lot of um, changes in our lives, where things can be painful and can have a bumpy road with it. And with that, cognitive dissonance. I know for me specifically, when I was kind of coming back around to my spiritual belief systems and Reiki, and it's a long path, and too long of a story to go into here. I was actually on the side of like agnosticism, and very science oriented. And so for me, it was a challenge to have that cognitive dissonance of what I was experiencing in Reiki energy and, the shamanic practices and things like that, with kind of these beliefs that I had that were a part of my culturally created self also, and how that can create that internal tension. And we say all the time that actually my belief system today is different than where I started. And a lot of that is because of the experiences that I have had that I know to be true, because of my experience and within my own knowing, and not that it's true for other people, but for me, within my own knowing, you know, it actually shaped my belief system, not the other way around. Um, so that can be another place of like, wait, how how can both of these things exist? And eventually you get to the point, I think, that you recognize that both things can exist, right? That it's just all of our own definitions and all of our own way of connecting, but that that first part of it, whether it's religious, whether it's scientific, whether it's, even from like an academic standpoint, we can have that um, cognitive dissonance that can be intellectually and emotionally taxing with it. I would say also there can be, in those uncomfortable experiences, we can have dark nights of the souls. I think that this can happen in these paths regardless, because we go through life circumstances. But when you have this big change within yourself, there can be, and also if that creates change in your kind of personal and existing environment, such as relationships, such as a change in your kind of religious or spiritual belief systems, all of those kinds of things that can create a lot of disharmony within yourself. Um, and so that can be another place where there's a lot of challenge around this path of spiritual awakening around it. Sometimes we can have physical symptoms. Many of us talk about this within Reiki energy. These ones are usually a little more short term, where you can get headaches or even kind of flu like symptoms, where you can sleep can be challenging. That's another one. Sleep can be very challenging when you have these experiences. Sometimes you wake up awake, sometimes you wake up with inspiration, other times you just have, there's definitely like, oh, I was able to sleep before this and now I'm not able to sleep. That can change, that goes in ebbs and flows. Also, we can have a heightened sensitivity. So that's something that you see all the time when people are, in this path of exploring spirituality, exploring metaphysics, exploring Reiki. Um, you see a lot of people that, go gluten free or dairy free because their body can't handle it. I'm just, naming a few. People that no longer can tolerate alcohol. That's another place that our bodies can definitely become more sensitive than they were before. And it's not even just to what we ingest, it's into our environment. Noise can be harder. I've definitely experienced that I've become more sensitive to noise, stimulation, overstimulation. Ironic that we just went to Disneyland there, although I do get overstimulated, of course, so does everybody. um, so anyway, but in general, like in houses and groups and circles, that heightened sensitivity is definitely a part of some of those physical symptoms that are very true. Kind of the deeper that you dive into these enlightened energy places. So the other place that can be a really big piece that we see all the time is our work. People need to change jobs. They need to change what they have been doing, whether that's a job or a business. That's another place that you can really see giant changes in people's life. Sometimes it's because they need a different meaning within their life. that they find that their job or their work doesn't have a level of fulfillment that they are needing within within themselves. Sometimes it can just be that you still do your job, but there isn't that same connection to it. Like it's a job, you go there and go home, and it supports kind of all of these other things. But that's definitely a piece of it that you see often enough. And whether or not it's that you know, quit your job and have a Reiki practice, although we see that all the time as well. Um, but it is also maybe that you just need a different job or different work because, you know, sometimes it's even toxic environments that you didn't necessarily notice before, but now you notice. And so you have to switch from that environment. Also, any sort of, uh, oh, I can't think of what I'm trying to say with it, but you know, where you're butting heads with a boss that maybe took advantage of, you know, how hard you worked before, and now you have to stand up for yourself a little bit more. So things like that that can be a part of this path and process. Um, Beyond like your immediate relationships, there can be a disconnection from mainstream culture. As I said before, workplace environments, social groups where materialistic values are kind of the predominant conversations, or even maybe it's not materialistic, maybe it's just very surface level conversations that can be so hard to partake in. This is, I would say, maybe even one of the most common things that can be challenging for people. Like, you know, being in chit chat, for example, can become harder. It's almost like you lose your skills with it. And that's why we say all the time about like finding safe spaces where you can talk about these things, and these groups and community where you can talk about these things, because it is harder when you are in places that where you are just doing chit chat. So you do need like these outlets where you are able to, as we say, that weirdometer, right? You're able to say the things that you're thinking about, that you're experiencing, all of those kinds of things that is not, you know, mainstream. Also depends on our communities, of course. You know, you find that pretty easily here in Portland and in different places, but it's not always that's not all of that easy in a lot of places where it is just more surface level conversations. So the other parts can be, you know, your practical life integration. What matters, you know, like, does this even matter to me? Those are just like, I'm talking about like the responsibilities of everyday life can be challenging with this, you know, new path. Also, there can be level of the other thing that can be a possibility is spiritual bypassing of ourselves, um, like, you know, addressing, using it to address, you know, our trauma, our psychological wounds, emotional difficulties, real world problems. Can see that. And I think that, you know, we can all be guilty of that from time to time. But then also just a really big understanding that that can be, that can be a part of this process with ourselves and with others. Also that there can be spiritual materialism this this as well. Like ego can co-opt spiritual experiences as achievements. Um, that it's like there's this kind of status seeking of spirituality. I think so many of us have seen that, um, and also that it can overwrite even kindness in some experiences, like, oh, you're just not spiritual enough, or judgment of others because of maybe the way that they live their lives or that they are not in these modalities. That can be a piece of this. I think so many of us have seen that as well. So there's that part of it. And then, gosh, I mean, it's like there's so many different things that we have within these. And then there's the other part of this that's like also the information overload, or the navigation of this path. Like, where do we go? What do we do? Where do we go from here? Especially if we're in that before and after. There's so many options. There's so many things to do. There's so many that even that can be overwhelming. In the beginning, too, it's like we want to know it all right now. Like, can I have just all of this information right now? That's so common too, and that we can get a little impatient with the path, right? That's such a big part of it, and guilty for sure of that, because it's so awe-inspiring. Out of with that, that is really out of like, I just am so um inspired by the experiences that I'm having, the change in who I am in a positive way, all of those kinds of things that can be such a big part of this. Is, I can go into a little bit of impatience, and kind of even a distrust of it, because I'm just not trusting the process, right? It's a journey, it's not a destination. And so that can be a part of it as well. And over time, you get used to that piece of like, okay, I get to continue through all the cycles of my life. I get to continue to explore this path and dive deeper and deeper into it within my knowing and my authentic self, and how I live in this world, and my um, patience and kindness and love with others in the world, and what I contribute to the world and to my family. Um, and so, you get to be inspired by the fact that never ends as a part of this, that we get to continue to dive, to open and grow and expand in all of those areas continually. And at my age, at a younger age, at an older age, all of that always continues. But in the beginning, that part can be a little overwhelming, right? And once you kind of discover some of these things, there's so much to know. There's so many ways to connect. There's so many ways to release all of those, you know, wounds, all of those culturally created layers, all of that forgetting. And there's so many ways to come into our remembering. There's so many ways to to continue to become more and more ourselves. And so it's like, which path do I choose? Which way do I go? What connects me the most? So it is a real, I know for the most part on these talks, we talk about some of the hardships of things, but we also really, it's like, how does it also empower us, which we'll talk about next week, and like continuing. But it's also really important because it can be helpful to know that you're not the only one, like, that we're not alone in these aspects of our journey, that other people experience them, that it is normal in all of the different ways that we experience. And that's not to bypass your own challenging or really hard experience. That's to more, you know, let you know that you're not alone in this, um it happens. I think for me, I always was like, gosh, am I the only one going through this? Am I the only one thinking this? Am I the only one experiencing this? Which can make it feel a little bit more lonely, or is something wrong with me? Am I not doing it right? But it's actually, all of it is normal in all the different ways that we experience it. And um it it I will say that when you come out on the other side of this, and hopefully we have people around us that support it in the different ways that they can. Not everybody, it's not always just like an immediate support. Sometimes it takes time in those relationships around us. Sometimes it doesn't, and that's its own navigation. But just so it's like over time, you do go through those hills as well as the valleys. Like that when you are on the other side of the challenges, it is an even greater experience of fulfillment, of happiness, of um contentment, of that greater version of ourselves that we get to experience as well. But also just to know that sometimes
Mhm.
there's challenges with it. And life can also be a part of this. Like different life experiences can then also, put us into these different things that I just explained, but it's also a part of this path of our spiritual journey, our spiritual awakening around it all. So, Colleen, I don't know if there's anything that you would like to add around that.
Well, it's such a big subject, and like we said, like Robin said, we'll be getting into, more of the solutions next week and the functionality of it. Um, because one of the things I would say in my own path with it was that we didn't talk about here is resistance, where I had personal resistance, because sometimes the information was bigger than my capacity to hold it, and I had to go through my own, when I say spiritual growth, to me the metaphor for that is like when you work out with weights and your muscles have to grow and then you have to rest and then you grow, and you continue to build your capacity for it. And so the different times that sometimes it was like a rocket ride, man, that it was just coming in so fast. And that could lead to resistance. Like, I can't do this. This is too much. It's more than I can do. And managing the challenges of some of the, real life experiences with it, because the joy goes with it at the same time. And so navigating through that real world part of it. And then the other part of it for me too was the reality awareness. And because of our culturally created self and the challenges of this kind of spiritual expansion, spiritual knowing, my personal belief system changed so much, and I had to stretch for that. And so, what I found for me personally is Reiki energy was what gave me the most gentle energy to work with for that growth, that stretching. And I always think of it as, my capacity to hold more um, would grow. And sometimes it felt as if it was just like this rocket ride of information input coming in. And I remember at one point, this particularly was right after I had gone to England and studied Karuna Reiki with William Rand. And we had also done one of my several of the really big ceremonies in our shamanic training. And I mean to tell you, I was just like on this fast, you know, trajectory of it. And I remember at the time thinking, fortunately, my life was in a place to be able to manage it, and how hard it would have been if it hadn't. And then understanding sometimes what came with that was the resistance to it all. And navigating through my resistance, because it was also what I wanted and then also what I was resisting. And so I wrote an article actually called Reiki Heals Resistance during that period. And this is just one period. I've had multiple experiences of this over the 25 years of personal growth. and spiritual awakening. But what I realized with the resistance is because we have free will, we always get to decide how much further we want to go with it. And I remember the experience of feeling like I was on a spiral and I would go around the circle and reach this capacity like, okay, I just I have to stay right here. I'm at capacity right now. And then the resistance, and what I came to understand about the resistance was it gave me the opportunity to decide, am I going back up around the next spiral? Am I going to choose that? For me, yes. But also, I would have to say, I know, spiritual awakening and working in these ways has been, the driving force in my life, so it's definitely something that I'm endlessly curious about, endlessly fascinated by, and endlessly compelled to continue with. So that's why we wanted to talk about the challenges today. We're going to go into the journey. And then next week, we're going to go into like really how do you bring all of this spiritual awakening into a functional, useful, everyday life benefit. And so this week we decided we needed to address these challenges because they can be very real and maybe you're not in them right now, or maybe you haven't experienced them, but I definitely see it. I also can definitely see it as a practitioner with people in relationships, that can be one of the big areas. And allowing other people to be at their pace and allowing them to have their own spiritual path the way they do, whether it even is what we think of as a spiritual path or not, is also part of the navigation of it all. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and go into the journey now because each of you has your own experience of what we're talking about, relationship with what we're talking about. And, maybe it's something very little or maybe it's very big for you right now. And so we're going to go into the journey. And in the journey, a lot of times we just spend time at the river of life, letting go. This time we're going to actually look at it and let you look at what are the things that you're dealing with. And then you'll be receiving gifts. We're still going to work with the Tree of Wisdom this week and receiving the gifts of wisdom to help you really settle into yourself and your truth, and then also to help you find any solutions that you need to find and discover in how this is working for you right now. Because it's so worth it. It's so worth it. But it can be, like I say, we talked about it and thought, yeah, we need to talk about this part because this part can be a big piece of it.